You're listening to So You Want to Start a Business podcast, and I am your host, Ingrid Thompson. Today we have another amazing businesswoman on the show. Ean Price Murphy runs Moxie Bookkeeping and Coaching. Whatever business you are in, I believe there is something for you in this conversation with Ean. Hello, and thank you for being here, for spending your precious time with me and my guests. Business, and especially the financial side of business, has become over complicated, and I aim to simplify it. And today I have Ean in a conversation to help do exactly that. My business is healthynumbers.com.au, and I'm on a mission to help every business owner understand how money works in their business, because I believe everyone deserves to be financially savvy when it comes to understanding how money works in business. In this podcast, we meet business owners and we delve into their wisdom and their lessons learned to offer easy business life hacks and debunk the common business myths. I'm keen to give you tangible and tactical tools, tips, and tricks to revolutionize how you build and grow your own business. My mission is to help small business owners find lasting financial safety. Why I wrote the book, So You Want to Start a Business. The book helps you understand business fundamentals and find a level of financial safety for you. This book is the only advertising on the podcast, and my guest gets to talk about themselves as well. Pretty much every day, someone somewhere in the world buys a copy of this book. They either buy it for themselves or for a friend or colleague they know who want to get into business. Head to wherever you buy your books online to order a copy. Today, we talk a lot about money with Ean. We talk about financial viability and what that means to her and the way she works with clients. Ean is a certified profit first professional. Goodness me, that is a mouthful. Ean explains how she works with her clients and especially how she helps business owners increase their pricing. Here's Ean Price Murphy.
Hello, and here we are today with Ean Price Murphy. Hello, Ean.
Hello.
Hello. And I have been so looking forward to this, and we had some trouble finding a time because you're there and I'm here, and there's you are such a busy woman. So tell us firstly, where in the world are you?
So I'm actually based in Northern California, although the business is based in Brooklyn, New York. So I lived in New York for 30 years and about 2 years ago returned back to California, where I grew up, to be closer to family. And my timing could not have been better with the pandemic. But trying to survive this in a 700 square foot fourth floor walk up in New York would not have been fun.
I think not, indeed. Do you miss it?
A little bit. I miss the people. I'm planning a visit back in the fall, and definitely looking forward to seeing a Broadway show. But I think by the time I left, after 30 years, I feel like I really checked every box.
Indeed. Oh dear, it's such a fabulous city, but I'm sure where you are in Northern California is just gorgeous too. All right, let's get into business. How do you describe your business, Ean?
So I actually simply say that I'm a bookkeeper, which is a little bit silly because obviously I'm a business owner and I have 10 employees and we do more than just data entry. But that's really what people understand. People know if they need a bookkeeper or not. They hear bookkeeper, they think, help me with my stuff. They hear accountant, they think taxes. So really what I do is management accounting, also known by controllership, but what a terrible word that is. So I just choose to say bookkeeping. What I really do is I help entrepreneurs break through the fear and the frustration of the money stuff so that they can learn the few phrases that they need to know to really understand what's happening with their business.
And this is exactly why you are on the show, because you and I are absolutely doing the same thing for entrepreneurs. And I just couldn't wait to have this conversation. So thank you. I love that distinction between the bookkeeper and the accountant. I've never quite heard it like that. And yeah, well, I used to cost management and stuff was another expression that was used for management accountant, because I worked as a management accountant in corporations, and it was really trying to help people understand the money, wasn't it? Mm. So when did you start the bookkeeping business?
So I began to freelance as the bookkeeper pretty soon after college. The longer version of that story, which I will try to keep very short, is that I didn't grow up with any particular affinity for numbers or math or anything, and grew up in a very solidly middle-class household where, we didn't have a lot, but we never went hungry. And so money just kind of wasn't discussed. It just, it was just one of those things. And as a result of that, I was financially illiterate. And I think that's true for most people. It's not something we learn in school, that even if you take accounting classes, that's very different than financial literacy. Knowing whether it's a debit or a credit really doesn't help you decide, what can I afford? Is this a good path to go down? How can I tell if it's working or not? And so very quickly out of college, trying to support myself, I racked up tens of thousands of dollars worth of credit card debt on gas and groceries, like just trying to get by. And mostly that was because I was significantly under earning. Again, I just did not have the context for what should I be making. I worked as a cocktail waitress and a bartender and was so reliant on tips, which really have nothing to do with service. They just have to do with the attitude of the person walking in. They already know how much they're going to tip you before they even come in the front door. And I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And so I eventually, the last job that I had was as an office manager. I'd been hired to be a telephone receptionist for a woman who had her own business. And I ended up being a full charge bookkeeper, an office manager, negotiating contracts. And when I asked her for $1 raise, which is ridiculous, and when I think about it now that I would ask for such a little increase, she offered me $0.25 instead. Oh, so that was certainly a blow, but it reinforced what I thought that I already knew, which was this type of work just doesn't make money. Or I'm just the kind of person that doesn't make money, or, because I was working under the notion of work hard and you'll succeed, follow your passion and the money will follow. And maybe, but A, not always. And B, if it slides through your fingers and you don't have a way to hang on to it, then absolutely not. So I left that employment and we parted as friends. And she actually gave me introductions to a lot of the people that I had already been sort of working with, the designers and the artisans and the contractors around her. And so I began to freelance bookkeep. And that was in the mid-90s. So that was a long time ago. We hired our first employee in 2003, and she's still with us. And we've grown to about 10 people now.
Wow, that's just amazing. So you've answered a couple of the other questions. So let's jump to the question, my favorite actually. It's the one that says, when did you realize you were in business? So you'd had this job, you'd had jobs, you'd relied on tips, started this in the mid-90s, you hire your first person at 2003. But where in the journey does this feel like a business to you?
That's a great question. And I think the reason that I would normally say hiring my first employee felt like a real business, but I actually don't know that I did at that point. I think at that point I knew that I needed some help, but she was someone who I already knew. And for a long time, I sort of had this worker among workers feel to my style, especially when you hire extremely competent bookkeepers, you don't really need to tell them a lot, right? They're good to go.
Yeah.
So I think it may have been when I hired my first stranger, who I think was probably employee number 2 or 3, that I was like, I'm a boss. I'm in business.
I love that. Often people say it's when they get their first client that they don't know where they came from. And yours is that you employed a stranger, which is even more fun. I love that question because everybody's point is different. Okay. So in the early days, and then how did you get customers? So you said that the person you'd been working for gave you some introductions, which is very generous and kind of them to do that. But where did you get customers from in the early days?
I mean, almost always it's been word of mouth. So either, from that very first moment of we're not going to work together, or maybe we do, here's someone else I think would really benefit from your service. But also then their accountant would say, oh, are you taking on additional, once they saw that I knew what I was doing, are you taking additional clients? Let me introduce you. And so we didn't do any marketing until 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We were in business a long time.
Ian, tell us, what is the name of your business? Because right now, if anyone is listening in the US, you service people in the US. Can you go beyond the US?
We do. We actually have a few international clients, a few in Canada. We actually have 2 in Spain. Not quite sure why, but there you go. So my business is called Moxie Bookkeeping and Coaching. And the reason that the vast majority of my clients are in the US is because I really like to make sure that I'm the best person to serve you. And if not, I'll send you to someone who is. And so I have people in Canada that I know, like, and trust who do what I do. And I just think, if they can bring an extra layer of expertise, why would I try to convince you to stay with me when I know you're going to be better served by somebody else?
Yeah. And, and I love that. So Moxie Bookkeeping and Coaching. And the website is
moxiebookkeeping.com.
moxiebookkeeping.com. And I love that approach because that's how I approach coaching as well, is that I know I'm not the business coach for everybody. I call myself a business coach, but of course it's more than that. It's really, setting up women to have better financial understanding. But, I'm not for everyone, as you are not for everyone. And, I love that approach, which is another reason why it was so good to have you in this conversation. So and I think one of the things that you talked about there that's so important when people are getting started in a business is where we get those early customers is from word of mouth or from, people saying this person's great at what they do, give them a call or get in touch, but also the partnership with accountants. So they're not doing what you're doing. And so tell me a little bit more about that sort of those partnerships and those relationships and getting customers from that. Is that partly how you've grown this business?
Yeah, I would say primarily. Again, I think that there is absolutely a place for marketing in terms of name recognition. But if you cast a wide net, you bring in all sorts of different fish, including fish you never intended to catch in your net. And by having partners that you work with who work closely, they work with the same people, but providing a different service. Those are people you can get to know very well, that you can send clients to, and they can send clients to you. And you already know that these are likely going to be highly qualified clients. Yeah. So it just saves time. It makes, the CPA look great that they can slide me right in. It makes me look great when I can refer to an excellent CPA. So it's really just one of those, the rising tide lifts all boats.
It sure does. And, having good people to refer to is essential. So let's talk about money, because that's one of my favorite topics, and I know it's one of yours. So how do we establish viability? And normally I would ask you about your financial viability, like how did you know this business was going to be financially viable? So you could touch on that. But in general, when you're working with a business, how do you help them understand this concept of financial viability?
I would say the simplest framework that I have ever come across, which is why it's the one that I use with the majority of my clients, is based in a book called Profit First by a guy named Mike Michalowicz. And the reason that I love this book is because it comes down to give every dollar a job, give every dollar a home. And so by separating out the money by its purpose, which sounds very weird to people if they're not used to having 8 different bank accounts, but it allows you to look at two numbers, essentially. Did I hit my sales target for the month? And how is my operating bank account doing? What's the bank balance? Is it generally trending up? Is it generally holding steady? Or is it slightly or significantly going down? And with just those two pieces of information, you have so much decision-making power over what's working, what's not working, what do I want to do before this becomes a crisis. So that's the language that I really prefer. To me, that's like, traveling to a foreign country and learning the 5 key phrases, right? How do I order a meal? How do I find the bathroom? How do I get a hotel for the night? Because you don't need to learn how to conjugate in the pluperfect subjunctive. You just need to know, are you okay? Right?
Yeah. And say hello and thank you.
Say hello and thank you.
Thank you. Indeed. I love that. I love Mike's book, Profit First. I love everything about that philosophy. And, I think being an accredited Profit First professional makes such a huge difference to how you approach the way you then work with your clients. Talk about pricing. How do you figure out your pricing? You don't need to tell us how much you charge right now, but
Sure.
It's more around how do we get to a price because it's a service. And a lot of people starting a business are starting something that's an intangible. It's not a thing. We're not buying a book for $25. We're buying a service that could be from here to here on a spectrum. How do we get pricing right for a service?
To me, the right pricing is, are you able to take home what you want? Like, again, that's just the simplest core question. So if you know how much you want to be bringing home every month or every year, then that's what we start with. And then from there, we say, okay, well, if we use that same Profit First framework, which is all percentage based, so now we can say, well, if we know that you're in the zone where your take-home pay should be 50% of your income after any materials or subcontractors that are delivering service for you, then let's double your desired take-home pay. And now we know what our sales goal is. Well, now we can kind of work and do a little bit more massaging of that information to say, how many clients would you like to service each month? And is this going to be direct, an hour of your time equals X number of people, or is it more of a recorded class or whatever, where 1 hour of your time happened once 2 weeks ago and now lives in perpetuity? So how many of those can you do without driving yourself bananas or working too hard? How many of those do you think you can sell? And what do you feel like the value is right now? Because I think that we all know the good advice of like, charge as much as you can. But if you're trying to sell something that you don't 100% believe in the value of it, it's going to come across funny. It's just going to have a slight strange smell to it. And people will pick up on that. And so I am always, a big fan of saying, well, why did you price it that way? That feels a little low to me. I don't think I've ever had to tell someone they're pricing too high. And then, so maybe we just start by doubling that. Do you feel like you can express the value of that number? And if they say no, we work backwards a little bit, but I'm absolutely someone who my mindset follows the evidence, not the other way around. Some people can really think themselves into right thinking, with the proper mindset, they can empower themselves to go do differently. Not me. I have to do it differently, see the result, and then my mind goes, all right, I'll come along with you this far. And so for me, that's my little like, well, let's step it up a little bit and see what happens. And that's totally okay, right? That if you unless you have a published price somewhere, you can continue to sneak that up until you get so much pushback that you're no longer closing a reasonable amount of sales.
I love that. Oh my gosh, there's so much in that answer. Just on that last point, I belong to a collective group, and they have, I think they say when you get 3 no's or 5 no's, then you know that you're gone too far. It's because their premise is just keep putting that price, inch it up, creep it up the way you just said. And it's then when you start to get that much pushback, you go, all right, well, I've probably reached the threshold for now. And then as you add more value, then you can have another go at creeping it. I love that. I'm going to come back to what you said about the actual pricing, but I just want to talk a little bit there about what you said, mindset follows evidence. And this is a question for later, but I want to bring it in now. Did somebody help you get there? Like, did you have mentors or coaches to help you get to that place, or is that something you always had?
No, I absolutely had mentors to get there. Every step of the way, I've had a mentor. Even going from that receptionist to being a full charge bookkeeper, I had her CPA working with me and giving me instruction and direction and corrections. I absolutely don't believe that we can do anything on our own. We might be the face or the pinnacle of the effort. But there is, that's one of the biggest things that I see that holds people back in business as well as in life, is feeling like I should not ask for help rather than I absolutely should.
Absolutely. So would you say coaching and mentoring is vital?
Vital, non-negotiable.
Yeah. I think what you're saying there about mindset follows evidence is that, it really, when we can see it, we can believe it, and our mindset goes there, and we see it over and over again. And it's why people start a business, because they see other people being successful in business. But what they're not seeing is all the background stuff about what you're saying about actually analyzing the numbers. And when you said there is, are you able to take home what you want, whether that's for a week or for a month? That's such a powerful way of really working with how do you get your pricing right, because so many people do what they do because they love it, or they're making a transition, or they started as a side hustle, and it never really gets that traction because they're not taking home what they want, and they never get that pricing right. So I love what you said there so much. Is there anything you'd add there? I think you covered it pretty well.
I think I covered it pretty. The only piece that I would add to the pricing that we were talking about is if you hear 5 no's, then you know that's good. I would say I would qualify that by saying only if those no's are coming from your ideal clients.
Yes.
Any no that, or even any advice or information that isn't coming from your ideal client, you can just say thanks and file it right in the trash can.
Yeah. And I love what you said about how many can you do and how many can you sell, because I work with a lot of health professionals, and they actually can only do so much themselves, a bit like you can only do so much bookkeeping till you have to get your next person, and then your next person, and then your next person. So I think getting that balance right with how much, and then how much value is that worth, because if you can only do 20, then you want to take home this much and your costs are this much. How many do you need and how much do you want to charge? That's a calculation that we have to sit down with pen and paper and the calculator and figure out.
Absolutely. And I think, that 20 is an important demarcation, right? That people think that they can work 40 hours in their business, and you'll be working 60 to 80 hours if you try to do that, because you have to remember how much time the marketing takes, the sales take, the administration takes, the bookkeeping takes. And even as you outsource that, ideally narrowing your job further and further to just your core of genius part that you love doing, you still have to guide and direct all of those. And, and ideally you're not working, the 40-hour work week is just awful.
Well, and most people don't get into business to do that,
Right.
But for a lot of health professionals, they are limited to how much capacity they physically, mentally have to actually be able to work with clients. Yeah. All right. Ian, you started this business, 20 years ago, a little bit longer than that. casting your mind over, and we can't take a magic wand, and look, things are so different now to what they were in the 90s. You know, computers barely existed back then. I mean, they did, but they were clunky. You know, so much has changed. But what would you do differently, you personally? And then I'm going to ask you about some of the things that you see other people doing. But what might you have done differently over the years? Perhaps not back that far back.
I would have raised my prices sooner. That's, I think that's probably what most people say in retrospect. I should have been charging more sooner, that I was charging what I needed to charge, not what I could charge. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made was I, freelanced as a bookkeeper for someone else while I was working for myself. And I sort of started my business because I looked at what they were doing and thought, well, I can do it better than that. And, and they were marking me up significantly. And I thought, well, and I don't need to mark up that much either. And that's such a tragic mistake, that I just really didn't understand what that markup is. Marketing, growth, sales, emergencies, right? All profit, tax, all the things.
Yeah. And that is, that's very common, not just in someone doing bookkeeping, but I've had guests on the show who are in marketing, who are in PR, who work in a lot of those service-based businesses, who were in another person's business. And the markup on that, they went, I know how much I'm being charged out at. I know how much I'm being paid, and I don't need to charge that. But we do.
Right.
We absolutely do.
Absolutely
from the beginning.
Do.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So let's talk about that. What do you see that as the number one issue for your clients as well right now? Like when you think about the clients who are getting into business, who are building and growing in those early few years, is that the key thing that they could do differently? Or do you see something else happening now that's a bit different?
I think that most of the clients that come to me are people who have read Profit First or at least heard of it. And so they're coming with a very different attitude than others. I think that a lot of times when they come to me because they know that they would like to increase their prices, but they're not sure exactly how. And sometimes we just need the permission to say, these really are your expenses. And unless you charge more, you're never going to take home what you want. And that's a huge part of what I do, which is so funny because I'm such a numbers girl, right? I'm so very task focused, but there's so much just sort of gentle guiding and permission and hand-holding and reassurance. And, one of my business mantra is, it's time for radically kind people to become comfortable with money. Like and this is one of the myths that I have on that document. People refer to money as just energy or just flow. And I go, no, money is a force for good. Money is inherently good. It can be used for the wrong things, just like a hammer. But the reason it was designed was to make things smoother and easier for everyone. And so don't allow the people who have misused this beautiful tool to give it a bad name. What great things could you do in the world if you had more money than you needed?
Yeah, and I love that because I believe in that so much. I remember there's a terrific story. A young Australian was kidnapped by extremists in a country in Africa, and the Australian government was hesitant and reluctant to get involved in paying ransom, as you can imagine. But also it was a country that was on the do not go list. So there was, we have to set example. Like I could understand why the government was kind of having its time to do this. But two influential Australians used their personal money to organise with the people that know how to deal with these people. I mean, and that's probably part of the Australian government, who can deal with what do you call those people? Pirates. It was land pirates. And they arranged for the ransom and the negotiation, and I don't know the details, but I know that it was personal money that was used, and that had a huge impact on me when I heard that story, because that's what you can do with money. And if you don't have money, and there's so many wonderful examples of people contributing to, water and schools and domestic violence shelters, and there's so many ways we can use money for good. And if you have money, you can make those choices and you can have that impact quietly. You don't even have to be big noting about it. You can just quietly do it. And I love that idea of radically kind people getting comfortable with money. I think we're on the same page here, Ian. So if anybody's listening and you're feeling radically kind and you want to have more money, Ian's the woman to help you increase your prices, because that's what is your speciality there, isn't it? So is it tough? I use the word tough. You can say difficult, challenging, struggling, whichever word you want to put in there instead. But is it tough being in business for you? And over the years, what's made it challenging, difficult, and how do you get through that?
I don't think it has been tough. And the reason I don't think it's been tough is because I love a good challenge. Mm-hmm. I love the opportunity for personal growth afforded by the opportunity for professional growth. I feel very lucky that I don't feel tied to a particular number of clients. So organic growth has been exactly the speed that I wanted to go at. That every time we get to kind of a tight fit with who we can, our customers versus our employees, we tend to release the bottom 10% back out into the world to find a better fit. And, and we always naturally have some clients that outgrow us every year, which we love. So it's been really a very easy growth trajectory. And the thing that's been the most challenging for me is the human resources piece. Because again, my particular personality is, I told you what to do, just go do it. Let me know if you have any problems, right? Like you don't need me to babysit you. So we don't do a lot of team building. We're a remote company. We don't do a lot of team building. We don't do a lot of bonding exercises, because my assumption, and for the most part, I have hired people astonishingly like myself. We just want to we just want to do our job. And, if the clients are happy, we're happy. So we've finally grown to the point where we hired an HR person about 6 months ago, and we're hiring a client concierge to sort of keep the too many cooks happening so that one person has one point of contact all the way through. And we're adding a chief of staff to organize all of the different pieces behind the scenes. So that's been really fun and challenging. And, and I brought in an outsourced COO to help us with that transition, because I know that that's not my strong suit. And I know it's not my business partner's strong suit. And so again, back to this idea of, asking for help is the only way it's the only way. It's never a failing. It's not even neutral, right? It's like you must get mentors and guides and support.
Yeah. And it's funny, because this whole independence of being in your own business is kind of the antithesis to that, isn't it? It's why, because people don't want to have to ask for help. And yet the people who are the most successful are the ones who ask for help as and when they need it. And then it doesn't mean you have to do exactly what someone else says, is you do your own version of that, but they help to give you perspective. Okay. What else would you add?
I was going to say, and money is one of the hardest areas for people to ask for help. Like that's sort of the last taboo, right? Because a lot of the people that I work with have extraordinarily successful businesses. They're well known. They have an amazing product. They've got a strong, loyal following. So they're bringing in great money, but then they don't know what to do with it. And that's not something that we've gotten to the point where we're willing to talk openly about, so oftentimes at a networking event, someone will say, well, how can I refer you? What questions will I hear? And I'll say, you'll never hear them. You'll never hear someone come to you and say, gosh darn it, I just can't reconcile my bank this month. Or, wow, I'm $100,000 in debt and the payment's due next week and I don't have that. Or I had to borrow from myself to pay taxes. Like, these are all things that business owners feel terrible about. But how terrible to allow yourself to feel terrible without going and getting the help to solve the problem. It's very solvable.
Yeah, it is. And you're so right about that, is that it's not a topic that people want to talk about. And it's like you said, in your childhood, it was there, it was a thing, it clearly was, because you were comfortable, but nobody ever mentioned it. It really has. Be interesting to see if there's a new generation that will talk about money in a different sort of way as we all talk about money more. And yeah, I'll be interested to see how this plays out over the next couple of generations. Well, I might not be here for the next few generations, but we'll see. But I think this is the power of the Profit First methodology, is that it does actually help people talk about the aspects of it. And what you said there is, people can be very successful and there can be a lot of money flowing, but there's not a lot of profit because it's flowing out. It might be flowing in, but it's flowing out, and it doesn't all need to flow out as much. And there's, the pricing could still be quite wrong, even though there's a lot of activity and a lot of flow. It's not necessarily being kept and retained and being used in the most effective way. When people say to you, this is a question without notice, and because you do what you do, you probably hear this, is, oh, it goes to what you were saying before about money and stuff, is profit. Oh, I don't really want to make a profit. Like, profits, like, that's not really why I'm in business. I just want to do what I love. What do you say to someone who says, yeah, don't really want to make a profit. I only need to make a little profit. I've only got a little business. I only want to make a little profit.
I think that I don't feel the need to challenge that right away. And the reason I don't is because what I'm hearing them say is, please don't judge me. I'm a good person. And I sort of assume that they don't really mean it, because, again, you wouldn't call me up if you weren't wanting to pay yourself more. It's just that we feel like we're not allowed to say that. That makes us greedy. That makes us material. That makes us shallow. That, means that we're betraying our art or whatever it is. It's all the baggage that we bring. And so, that's fine. You can tell me that. And a lot of times my answer is, great. You don't have to keep it. Just because you make it, you don't have to keep it.
Find somewhere else for it to go and do good work.
Right. Great. So let's think about, and again, I know that I'm talking a lot about how much I love Profit First, but it's because I love Profit First. One of the pieces of it that I think is so important is this idea of a quarterly profit distribution. Well, that sounds so dry and boring unless, we have an open Zoom call, anyone can come join, profit party, where you can come and say, this is what I'm going to use my distribution for this time. Because it's not just numbers moving around. It's not just money. It's what is that doing for you? Are you going to take your first vacation in a long time? Are you going to take your first nice vacation? Are you going to just take another nice vacation, or save for retirement, or a down payment on a home? What doesn't matter what it is. Come celebrate. Were you able to increase your profit by 1% or more? Or even if you didn't need to do that, how are you using that money to celebrate your accomplishments in your business?
Yeah. And, if we go back to your story at the beginning, where, I love that idea of having a quarterly profit party. If you go back to your story about, you went to your boss and you asked for a pay rise and you wanted $1 and she gave you a quarter, or she offered you a quarter. If you have profit in your business and you believe your team deserve more, then there's $1 there for the team, not a quarter. And so, I'm not saying you have to give everybody a pay rise of $1 every time you have a profit party, but you can pay your team well. You can provide them with training. Like, there's so much that we can do with profit in a business. When you say that was the beginning of the end of that job for you, when that happened, this is what happens in business. If you can't keep your team and you can't look after the people that are important to you, then what's the point of being in business? And that's why profit's so important.
And that you are your most important employee. So a lot of business owners say, oh, but I take such good care of my team, I'll go without this time. And I go, no, wait, it's not either or. Again, it's not all boats but yours rise. No, all the boats have to go, all of them.
All the boats rise. I love that expression. Okay, Ian, you and I could talk all day about all of this, about business and what we've learned, and there are other questions, but you've answered them about coaching, about asking for help. We've talked about all those things. So as we bring it to a close, is there anything else that you would like to add to our listening audience who are either thinking about starting a business, or they have started a business and they're growing, or they're just interested in business and they like listening to the podcast? Is there anything you'd like to leave us with as we bring this to a close?
I would highly recommend the book, Profit First. There are some specific versions for specific industries. There's actually a woman named Suzanne Mariga who just came out with Profit First for minority business enterprises. And she has a lot more she just has a different perspective. So she has a lot more sort of mindset woven in. It's obviously still Mike's system, but I actually in some ways prefer that version of it. Because I don't think a lot of us come from a corporate world like Mike did. And I would say, just give yourself the mandate to ask for help. Whatever that means to you, go reach out and find someone to support you. Because if the math is the thing that's blocking you, find a buddy who will help you through the math part. Or if, whatever the piece is, and there's a lot of inexpensive ways or even free ways to do that. They're not always as fast or as expedient, but start with where you are and grow yourself from there.
Yeah, I love that. Start with where you are and grow yourself from there. Thank you so much, Ian. It's been a terrific conversation, and I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you.
I love that right there. Ask for help, find a buddy. And as Ian says, she didn't have a strong math background, and that money wasn't discussed in her home. Like so many people, there's money there, but we just don't talk about it. We don't understand it. We don't learn about it. I'm super grateful for Ian and for her wisdom and expertise and time to record this conversation. What is your standout today? It has been a big focus on money and profit and mindset. As you know, my mission is to help small business owners find lasting financial safety by helping them overcome the fear and frustration of the money stuff. To help you with this, I have created an online financial health check. 15 simple yes/no questions about money in your business. Go to healthynumbers.com.au/health check. It is completely anonymous, and you will receive a detailed and personalised report when you're finished. You can read it right there on your screen and stay completely anonymous. If you want to receive a copy, add your email and you receive a copy of your personalised report immediately. Head over to healthynumbers.com.au/health check. The aim is to help you understand where you're strong when it comes to your business financials and the areas where you're not as strong, and it will suggest resources that I've created to help you. Stabilizing the financial side of business goes a long way to creating financial safety in business. So as I ask you, what action are you inspired to take? When we pursue business and entrepreneurship based on core values and deepest integrity, and at the same time build a financially successful business, we live richer and fuller lives. Till the next time, thanks for listening.